everyone, my name is Josh and this is Whimsical and Interesting Musings, and today I'm going to be talking about the third episode of Series 8 called Paraskedekatriaphobia. And this episode, basically, the title alludes to the fear of Friday the 13th, and this follows Gareth, who is played by Reece Shearsmith, as he basically prepares for the infamous day in question, where he basically goes through such a extreme measure of keeping himself under lock and key to the degree where he would phone in sick from work and basically stay home the entire day listening to the radio and having cups of tea. But as he is about to endure a nice relaxing day, or shall I say a quiet day in, he is constantly, interrupted and constantly, barraged by an entire group of people who come in and basically want to either help him or they have to that they try to help him out of certain situations, or they get called to deliver a parcel, or someone has to basically get someone out of a particularly difficult place to get out of without a key. So there's a lot of things going on in this episode. This episode mostly focuses on comedy more than anything else. One of the key elements that makes this episode really shine is the humour and the idea of basically taking this concept and reutilising the humour and the characterisation of Gareth. And he is a character who might seem kind of overly sensitive or overly worried about Friday the 13th, but as the episode goes on, you realise that there is an actual reason behind all of that does seem very legitimate. But then you also get the added element of genuine humour. There are a lot of great jokes, and I love how they utilise the bad luck cliches, like such as never stepping under a ladder, and the black cat coming in, and all sorts of other things, shattering a mirror. And it really does add so much to the overall presentation. This episode is considerably lighter than the previous episode, Mother's Ruin, but what I really like about this episode is it really does... While I was watching it, I was genuinely upset and angry that a lot of these characters, like the delivery person, the locksmith, and all these other characters were coming into Gareth's address without really kind of having their consent, without officially having his consent. Like, so for example, there's a scene where the delivery person comes in and says they need to sign for the package, and then this leads into him wanting to go and get a pen, but then there's no pens in the house, there's only one pen that he has on his person. And then of course the delivery person comes in and says I really need the loo, and then they go into the bathroom, end up breaking the door handle off of the door from the inside. So Mr. Reece Shearsmith, aka Gareth, has to essentially get a screwdriver, but instead of doing that, the delivery person calls out a locksmith to the address. And part of me felt like it's very weird that this character was only in the drive for 5 minutes and immediately knew the address of Shearsmith's character of Gareth and where to find them and where exactly she is. So I thought that was a little bit weird. But then there was a very weird sequence where Mr. Reece Shearsmith's character, Mr. Steve Pemberton's character, who's this locksmith, comes into the house and he essentially puts a ladder into the main part of the house, but instead of actually it felt very weird because he is essentially a locksmith. He's someone who essentially specialises in looking at locks and repairing locks and seeing what essentially is wrong with locks. So the fact that he has a ladder in his possession that he utilises in this particular sequence, it felt odd. But then on repeat viewings, when you know what the twist is, when you go into it knowing that the big twist is what it turns out to be, the actual scenes themselves actually come across as a lot more funnier than I originally realised, because even though it is meant to be deliberately played for laughs, I kind of found myself thinking, okay, these characters are going from totally outlandish and outrageous to be just downright rude. Like the fact that they're just kind of walking into this guy's house, it really kind of feels like an invasion of privacy, and it really kind of makes it feel even more awkward. and really upsetting when you're watching him kind of try to relax and try to, you know, make the best of a bad situation where all these people coming in. He's trying to deal with his anxiety, but then of course he's also trying to deal with the fact that, you know, all these people are in his house and they're wondering why he wants them to leave so quickly, or why he's, you know, begging them to just, you know, walk out the door and never look back, kind of thing. But I really do like the episode. There is a lot of humor. I like the fact that, you know, the main the delivery person, the first person who comes through the door, basically needs to go to the toilet, but then she has quite, you know, quite quite serious claustrophobia, but then she quite accidentally slips at one point, and she acts way too calm for someone who's claustrophobic. And Shearsmith goes, "Oh, your claustrophobia seems to have worn off quite nicely." And she goes, "Oh, it's just because I'm so happy being in this, you know, white sanded beach with a lovely breeze," and things like that. So there's a lot of great jokes in this. I really like the fact that these things are deliberately put in there to really kind of make Shearsmith's character deliberately be pushed to the nth degree and see how he's going to get out of it. And to a certain extent, he has managed very well. Like the fact that he manages to climb across the banister of the stairs to kind of get past the ladder, so that it just, you know, so he can go round the ladder as opposed to under it, and then he tries to prop it up so that he tries to get it back into its small fittings, and then just putting it aside. That's really clever, and I really like the fact that it requires him to be a little bit to you know, demonstrate a lot of ingenuity with the way he gets around these various difficulties. And then of course the grandchild shows up, Steve Pemberton's character's grandchild shows up, and again, who would do this? Like, who would do this in a logical perspective? But then of course when you start to realize that, oh, this is actually a part of a big twist, which is exposure therapy, which is what the wife actually asks Gareth's therapist to do. It really does kind of add so many interesting elements to the actual presentation of the story, and why these characters are acting so strange, and why they're actually, you know, going into this direction. It reminded me a little bit, even though technically this wasn't the inspiration, it reminds me of the film The Truman Show, where Jim Carrey's character basically plays this guy who's in this sort of reality TV setup, but he's kind of out at sea in regards to what the other characters are doing, and all these other characters know exactly what the game is. They know what the assignment is. They know how to, you know, play their characters. They get very method. They really slip into the roles seamlessly. There are some instances where the characters slip, like I say, for example, the delivery man or the delivery woman turns out to be, you know, have a very different, you know, accent and a very different behaviour. But then, of course, she lets her backstory that she has severe claustrophobia slip when she's in the bathroom, because she acts way too casually. She even says at one point, "Oh yeah, Friday the 13th is terrible. Remember that true story of that guy who killed all the teenagers in America? That's a true story, you know." And Shearsmith just goes, "No, it isn't." I I love references to that franchise. Like, I really do. I love Friday the 13th. But yeah, it reminded me of the Truman Show in the sense that this character is totally in the dark about what's going on. Yet all these characters are acting strangely and behaving rather, you know, unlike human beings would behave in the real world. Like, most people wouldn't just wander into a stranger's house while the door's open, or while, you know, the owner of the house is preoccupied trying to do other things, trying to keep everything together. So that, I thought, was a very interesting reference that they made. And I think the entire episode kind of feels like a homage to those sorts of films. And it even, you know, pays homage to screwball comedies, screwball British comedies like, you know, Clockwise, starring John Cleese. And even though this isn't British, it did remind me a little bit of the film Oscar, starring Sylvester Stallone. If anyone's seen that, let me know what you thought in the comments. I actually think it's a really funny movie. There's a lot of really great moments in it. It's been a while since I've seen it, though, but I did kind of deliberately, I did kind of remember it. It did spring to mind when I watched Off the Shelf Reviews tackle it as a part of their, you know, film reviewing discussion show, and I really did enjoy the references that they made to that, and I thought, oh yeah, that's that film I was thinking of, and I actually really liked it. That's another good channel, I think, but I really did like this episode. It was really funny. There were moments where I actually found myself going, oh my god, can he just tell these characters just to leave? But that's kind of the beauty of this entire scenario. The obvious scenario, which a lot of us would go to, he doesn't do that. He's much more polite, and he is one of those characters who is trying his hardest to literally be as polite as possible whilst also demonstrating his wealth of knowledge. Like when he does the phone in with Dermot O'Leary, and he basically explains the origin of Friday the 13th, um, which is too vast at the moment for me to actually remember from memory. But what I really like about it is he decides to act very politely, even though technically he is basically being condescending to Dermot O'Leary. I thought that was kind of hilarious, but I like the ending because even though a lot of people could say it is kind of very familiar to Diddle Diddle Dumpling, where you are trying to basically uncover why this character has a severe case of fearing Friday the 13th, you really do get this impression that he really is someone who really holds the weight of these decisions and these various experiences that he's had throughout his life, especially in his childhood, where he was in a field trip, school trip to France, and he ends up, having um, these this bus full of children go off without him, and then it's he later sees, the bus crash and blow up and burn, and he feels the weight of that decision that he could have been on that bus as well. He could have been on that bus, and he could have actually, been one of the casualties of that tragedy. So it's that element that really kind of draws him into being so afraid of Friday the 13th and so suspicious. No, so superstitious, excuse me. And I really do like that aspect. It really does add a lot of dimension and a lot of weight to his character. Again, Shearsmith really has a lot of range, and I really do feel kind of sorry for him that he doesn't get recognised for his talent a lot of the time as an actor. He really does pull out all the stops in his particular performance, and he really shows his comedic sensibilities, especially his physical comedy, because there are a lot of moments where he is really quite physical, and he really does showcase his love for physical comedians like Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton, and Charlie Chaplin, all these physical comedy geniuses. So you really do get that impression that they are kind of paying homage to classical comedy in this respect, and there's even a little bit of Mel Brooks in High Anxiety in this particular character as well, where it's basically got the entire framework of discussing someone's mental state, but at the same time they're also throwing in jokes and references to Hitchcock films and all these other things. So there's a quite wide variety of genres that they're playing with, even though it is staying very true and very specific, very much close to a specific genre of the British comedy genre. It has a lot of references to the film Clockwise, starring John Cleese, where this character is trying to have a very quiet, very organised trip to a teachers' convention, but then of course he keeps getting sidetracked by all these other things. Whereas in this episode, the character is inside one location, and he's just trying to keep his order and his sense of control over everything, even though he doesn't have any control over what these characters are doing. And it's intentionally done. It's intentionally done to remove all agency, because his wife has asked his therapist to engage in exposure therapy, which is where they take something that you fear and basically gradually make you conquer it, make you cured of that fear. So they might start off with a picture of the thing that you're terrified of, and they'll test your endurance of it. Like if you're frightened of a picture of, say, a spider, you're going to freak out, and obviously they'll say, oh, okay, we're going to have to do this gradually. We'll have to, use sensations, and then we'll do, then we'll look at the picture again, or we'll do sensations where we'll make you touch something that's very similar in sensation to the thing that you fear, so that you can touch it, so that you can get used to touching it, and then of course we'll bring out the real thing. But we won't tell you that we're bringing out the real thing until you actually rip off that blindfold and you actually feel it and you actually see it for yourself. It's really quite a good way of getting people to overcome their fears. But in this case, I think Shearsmith's character really could have benefited from a actual physical consultation with his therapist and actually have that set up. But in the tradition of Inside Number 9, it's very well telegraphed, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel predictable, and it doesn't feel bad. It feels like, okay, this is actually a really good setup, and it's got a very good cast of characters. Some of them are a little bit over the top, and the comedy can be a little bit much sometimes, but I do feel like it really does push the comedy angle, and it does it very well, whilst also mixing in some of that emotional weight that makes us love Inside Number 9 so much. So there's a really great, balance of comedy and genuine, good character work here. And I really do feel like a lot of the critics have kind of just basically labelled this as, oh, it's basically a half hour of comedy where the twist is, where you can see the twist a mile away. But here's the thing: the twist is okay. The twist is very good, and I think that really kind of adds. It's a very human. It's a very character-driven piece, and it really is a very good piece of work. It might not be as good as Mother's Ruin, the previous episode, but I do feel like this episode is pretty good, and I do hope that a lot of other people share the same thoughts in the comments. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode 3 of Inside Number 9 Series A. I'm not going to mention the title again, and because I feel like it's just too long and hard to pronounce, I only mentioned it once. But yeah, I did really like this episode. I thought the performances were fantastic, especially the little girl who played Reese Shearsmith, Sue Pemberton's granddaughter. I felt like she did a very good job. She was very good at being mischievous and being cheeky and throwing glitter all over the place, and locking them in the bathroom and making sure that they don't leave. She was actually a good actress, and a lot of the actors did a very good job. And I have to mention the big twist of this episode. There's actually a double twist in this episode. One of the twists is that it's actually exposure therapy that Smith's character is undergoing for his therapy. But then the second twist is that he gets a lot of good luck after shattering the mirror, and there's that wonderful image of all the children that potentially died in that bus crash just being visible in the shards of broken glass in the mirror, which I thought was a very good visual motif. And he's sort of in the middle, sort of looking like he's broken, but then he's like so starting to come back together, like almost like pieces of paper drifting on the surface of a lake, almost, where it's very slowly starting to come back together, or it's slowly starting to take form. It's such an interesting visual image. And then Dermot Leary shows up, gives him this big amount of money, and then he sort of wakes up thinking it's a dream, only to realise that the whole thing was real. And not only that, but when he does his final bit of bad luck superstition breaking by opening umbrella indoors, his wife goes to work, and while he's listening to the radio, I think it's Radio 1 with Dermot O'Leary, outside, just out of eye shot or sort of eyesight, his wife gets knocked down by a car. And this is one of the ones where when I first saw it, I actually really did have a little bit of a chuckle, because I thought, oh, that's a little bit of dark humour. But then I actually found myself thinking, oh my God, that's actually really tragic, because it basically says that everything that Shearsmith's character went throughout the course of the story, that entire ordeal with the exposure therapy, it all kind of came to nothing, and all his work that he did through that entire process kind of came to nothing in the end. And it really kind of adds a certain level of, oh, that's actually kind of disappointing, and it's really tragic in a way, because it shows that he really is right to be suspicious of all these things, or superstitious. And it really is also extra tragic because of course he lost his wife. But even though it's kind of played for laughs in that moment where, oh, he's not really looking and he's listening to the song I Should Be So Lucky by Kylie Minogue, it's very funny, but then at the same time it's also really sad, because eventually he's going to turn around and eventually he's going to see that his wife has just died and been knocked down by a car. But then again, it could also be happy, because it could also mean that, oh, quote unquote happy, because, she might just be slightly injured. Like, I'm trying to make it more light-hearted than it actually is, probably. But I actually really do like that ending on multiple levels. I like the fact that they did a double twist, because usually Inside Number 9s are usually happy with just the one twist. Sometimes they'll do a double twist in certain episodes. But for the most part, this was actually very well handled, and I felt like Supertoner Shearsmith did a very good job. I don't think it's as good as Mother's Ruin in regards to episodes, but I do think it's a good one, and it is entertaining, and it does bring the laughs, and I think that's something that really is important. And I liked the characters. I liked the actress who played the delivery woman. I felt like she did a very good job playing the delivery woman as this person who's very, very, very kind of, stupid in a way. Like she says things like, "Oh, we were meant to, use the thing that you used to sign your name with your finger, but the machine broke when I was um when I was opening a Belvita packet and just smashed on the floor as I was trying to open a Belvita packet and things like that." So there's a lot of funny jokes like that. But then there's the Friday the 13th joke, which is, "Oh, it's like that true story that happened in America with that man killing those kids with a knife." And he goes, "No, it isn't real, it's fake," and things like that. So there's a lot of great gags in there. And of course, my favourite one is where the acting troupe goes crazy and does their little routine, this random bit that just comes out of nowhere together. And then Shearsmith just turns to his therapist and goes, "And you think I'm the one who needs fucking therapy?" I I love that line. I mean, that literally is, he's saying what we're all thinking, right? Oh yeah, but this episode was really good, and I really am looking forward to hearing you guys' thoughts in the comments. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? And let me know what you thought. Did you think the twist was good? Did you think the double twist was really good, or did you think it was mean spirited for such a light-hearted episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Whatever your thoughts are, comment below and be sure to let me know. And I hope you're all doing very well. This has been Joshua Whimsical and Interesting Musings. Take care. Bye bye for now.